In modern warfare, moments sometimes unfold that reveal not only the intensity of combat, but also the complex and dangerous nature of battlefield tactics. The war between Russia and Ukraine has produced many such moments. Some have involved large-scale battles, others have taken place in brief encounters that nevertheless carry deep significance. One such moment began with something unexpected. Reports from the battlefield described Russian forces appearing to surrender during a confrontation with Ukrainian troops. The signal of surrender is traditionally one of the most recognizable gestures in warfare. Soldiers lay down weapons or raise their hands to indicate that they are no longer participating in combat. For centuries, that gesture has carried meaning across armies and nations. It communicates the intention to stop fighting. In conflicts governed by international conventions, surrender represents a shift from combat to detention. Soldiers who surrender are expected to be treated as prisoners of war under internationally recognized rules. But the situation unfolding in Ukraine suggested something different. According to accounts from the battlefield, the appearance of surrender was not necessarily what it seemed. Ukrainian forces encountered Russian soldiers who appeared to be giving up, creating a moment that required immediate decisions under dangerous circumstances. The war between Russia and Ukraine had already produced countless examples of uncertainty on the front lines. Soldiers operate in environments where visibility is limited, communication can be disrupted, and every movement carries potential risk. In such conditions, identifying genuine surrender becomes a critical and sometimes difficult task. Ukrainian units positioned along contested areas have been trained to remain alert in situations where the intentions of opposing forces are unclear. When reports of a possible fake surrender began circulating, the implications were serious. The concept of pretending to surrender during combat carries legal and ethical significance under international humanitarian law. It raises questions about the use of deception in warfare and the responsibilities of armed forces to follow established conventions. For Ukrainian troops, the immediate priority remained survival and defense. Frontline soldiers must make rapid decisions that affect the safety of their units and the civilians they are protecting. Every signal on the battlefield must be evaluated carefully. The encounter involving Russian troops presenting the appearance of surrender quickly became a subject of intense discussion among observers of the war. Military analysts and journalists examining the conflict began reviewing the details surrounding the event. Footage and reports from the area contributed to a broader conversation about the conduct of warfare in Ukraine. Ukraine has repeatedly emphasized its commitment to defending its territory while operating within the framework of international law. This position has been communicated by Ukrainian officials in numerous international forums. The government has also highlighted the importance of protecting civilians and adhering to recognized wartime standards. Russia's invasion of Ukraine began in February 2022, initiating one of the most significant military conflicts in Europe in decades. Since then, Ukrainian forces have continued resisting Russian advances across multiple regions. The conflict has involved artillery exchanges, armored movements, and air attacks that have created difficult conditions for soldiers and civilians alike. Amid these realities, trust on the battlefield becomes fragile. When opposing forces encounter one another, signals and gestures that normally carry clear meaning can become sources of uncertainty. The appearance of surrender is meant to represent the end of combat for those involved. But when that signal is misused, it introduces a dangerous layer of doubt. Ukrainian soldiers stationed in contested zones have spoken about the constant need for vigilance. Their responsibility is not only to defend their country, but also to protect the members of their own units. Every decision made during a confrontation can determine whether a situation ends safely or escalates into violence. The reported incident involving Russian troops presenting what appeared to be surrender placed Ukrainian forces in exactly that type of situation. They had to evaluate whether the gesture represented a genuine attempt to cease fighting or whether it concealed another intention. Moments like this illustrate how quickly battlefield conditions can change. A soldier raising his hands could signal the end of resistance, or it could signal something else entirely. One Ukrainian serviceman, speaking quietly in a later reflection, described the tension of such encounters. "You watch every movement," he said, "because 1 second can change everything." That statement captures the emotional reality faced by soldiers operating in uncertain conditions. They carry not only weapons, but also the responsibility of interpreting signals that might determine life or death. The war between Russia and Ukraine has already transformed global discussions about security, sovereignty, and military conduct. But for the individuals standing on the front lines, the conflict is experienced in moments like this one: a sudden gesture, a raised hand, a decision that must be made in seconds. Ukraine's forces continue defending their territory against Russia's invasion, confronting situations that test both their discipline and their resilience. And as reports of the alleged fake surrender circulated, the world began asking a simple but serious question: what actually happened in that moment on the battlefield? As the war between Russia and Ukraine continued to unfold across contested regions, frontline encounters frequently placed soldiers in situations where decisions had to be made in seconds. The reported incident involving Russian troops appearing to surrender created one of those moments. Ukrainian soldiers were already operating in an environment shaped by constant uncertainty. Artillery exchanges echoed across open terrain. Armored vehicles moved through damaged roads and fields. Communication between units required careful coordination as operations continued under the pressure of ongoing combat. In such conditions, every signal from opposing forces carries weight. When Russian soldiers appeared to surrender, the gesture immediately demanded attention from Ukrainian troops who were present at the scene. In warfare, surrender is traditionally communicated through visible actions, such as laying down weapons or raising hands. These actions normally indicate that combat has stopped. But the situation described by Ukrainian sources suggested that the moment might not have followed that traditional pattern. Ukrainian soldiers observing the encounter had to evaluate whether the surrender was genuine. That evaluation required quick judgment. Frontline soldiers are trained to remain cautious in encounters where the intentions of opposing forces cannot be confirmed immediately. Even a small movement or unexpected action can shift the situation dramatically. For Ukrainian forces defending their territory, the stakes remained extremely high. Russia's invasion had already produced numerous confrontations in which Ukrainian troops faced larger formations of Russian units. Defensive operations required constant alertness and coordination. The reported incident involving the apparent surrender became a moment of intense focus for those present. Ukrainian soldiers observed the Russian troops carefully, watching for movements that could reveal whether the gesture truly represented surrender. Moments passed. Seconds stretched longer than usual. Battlefield decisions often occur within narrow windows of time where hesitation can increase danger. Ukrainian troops maintained their positions while evaluating the situation unfolding in front of them. Then the tension intensified. Accounts from the encounter suggested that the appearance of surrender did not remain consistent with the expectations normally associated with that gesture. The behavior of one of the Russian soldiers raised concerns that the situation might involve deception rather than genuine surrender. That realization forced Ukrainian troops to react quickly. Their training required them to protect themselves and their unit while maintaining awareness of possible threats. Any indication that a surrender might be false immediately changes the dynamics of the encounter. When soldiers believe that an opponent may be attempting to exploit the signal of surrender, the sense of caution becomes even greater. Ukraine's forces have repeatedly emphasized their commitment to defending their country while respecting international rules governing armed conflict. However, when opposing troops use tactics that create confusion, frontline soldiers must respond based on the conditions in front of them. In the reported encounter, Ukrainian troops moved to secure the situation. Their objective was clear: ensure the safety of their unit, prevent any action that could endanger their position. Combat environments rarely provide perfect clarity. Soldiers must interpret movements and gestures quickly while under extreme stress. The moment described in reports from the battlefield illustrated exactly that type of challenge. Ukrainian soldiers confronted a situation where the signal of surrender, normally associated with the end of combat, appeared to be accompanied by actions that raised suspicion. For those present, the priority was survival. They remained alert, watching every movement and maintaining readiness in case the encounter escalated. One Ukrainian serviceman later reflected on the tension of that moment. On the battlefield, he said quietly, "You learn to trust what you see, but you also learn to question it." Those words reveal how complex modern combat situations can become. Signals that once carried clear meaning may no longer guarantee safety. The war between Russia and Ukraine has repeatedly demonstrated how rapidly circumstances can shift. Frontline units operate in landscapes marked by destroyed buildings, damaged roads, and open fields where visibility can be limited. Communication systems can become unreliable during intense engagements. Under those conditions, soldiers rely heavily on observation and experience. The incident involving the apparent Russian surrender quickly attracted attention beyond the immediate battlefield. Reports circulated through military channels and international media, prompting broader discussions about the use of deception during combat. International humanitarian law places importance on protecting those who surrender. The misuse of surrender signals introduces serious ethical and legal questions. When combatants appear to surrender while intending to continue fighting, the consequences can affect trust between opposing forces. Ukrainian officials have consistently emphasized the importance of following recognized wartime rules while defending their country. At the same time, they acknowledge that frontline soldiers must respond to threats as they appear. The reported encounter demonstrated how fragile trust can become during an ongoing war. For Ukrainian troops, the situation ended with their unit maintaining control of the area and ensuring that no immediate threat remained. The soldiers involved continued their mission. Their responsibility was not only to defend territory, but also to remain vigilant against tactics that might endanger their unit. Moments like this rarely last long in real time, but their significance can resonate far beyond the few seconds during which they occur. For the Ukrainian soldiers present, the encounter reinforced a lesson that has become familiar during the war. Every signal must be evaluated carefully, every movement must be watched closely, and every decision must prioritize the safety of those standing beside you. As the war continues, Ukrainian forces remain committed to defending their country against Russia's invasion. The reported incident involving the appearance of a fake surrender serves as another reminder of the unpredictable challenges faced by soldiers operating on the front lines. It also raises a broader question about the nature of warfare itself. When signals that traditionally represent peace are used in ways that create confusion, the consequences extend beyond a single encounter. They shape the trust that exists or fails to exist between opposing forces. And for Ukrainian soldiers defending their homeland, that trust can mean the difference between safety and danger. As the war between Russia and Ukraine continues, moments that occur in seconds on the battlefield often echo far beyond the immediate location where they happened. The reported encounter involving Russian troops appearing to surrender has become one of those moments that highlights the complexity of modern combat. For Ukrainian soldiers defending their country, the experience reinforced a lesson that has become increasingly familiar since the beginning of Russia's invasion. The front line is a place where uncertainty never disappears. Ukrainian forces remain positioned across regions where military activity continues to shape daily operations. Soldiers patrol areas that include open terrain, damaged villages, and infrastructure affected by months of conflict. Every position they hold represents part of the larger effort to defend Ukraine's sovereignty. Within these environments, trust becomes one of the most fragile elements of warfare. A raised hand, a weapon placed on the ground, or a signal that normally communicates surrender can instantly change the direction of a confrontation. But when that signal becomes questionable, soldiers must rely on caution. Ukraine's military leadership has consistently emphasized discipline among its forces. Ukrainian troops are expected to follow recognized wartime standards even while confronting the challenges created by Russia's invasion. These standards include the treatment of prisoners and the protection of civilians. However, the battlefield rarely offers perfect conditions for applying those principles without difficulty. When opposing forces act in ways that blur the meaning of surrender, the burden of judgment falls on the soldiers standing face to face with the situation. The reported incident involving Russian troops presenting the appearance of surrender therefore carries significance beyond the immediate encounter. It illustrates the type of dilemma that soldiers can face when signals traditionally associated with peace become uncertain. For Ukrainian troops who have spent months defending their homeland, vigilance has become an essential part of daily operations. They observe movements carefully, they evaluate gestures that might indicate surrender, and they remain aware that the safety of their unit depends on their ability to interpret events accurately. Across Ukraine's front lines, soldiers continue performing their duties under conditions shaped by the ongoing war. Artillery fire can be heard in the distance. Supply vehicles move along routes that must be protected from attack. Commanders coordinate operations while monitoring the activities of Russian forces across contested areas. The encounter involving the apparent fake surrender occurred within this larger context. Ukraine's forces have maintained their defensive positions while resisting Russia's attempts to gain control over Ukrainian territory. Every engagement between opposing units carries risks that extend beyond the immediate outcome. For soldiers involved in these confrontations, the psychological pressure can be intense. They must remain calm while evaluating situations that evolve rapidly. The responsibility to protect fellow soldiers and civilians requires decisions that must be made without hesitation. One Ukrainian serviceman, reflecting on the realities of the front line, described the emotional challenge in simple words. "You learn to stay ready," he said quietly, "because the moment you relax, danger returns." That statement captures the constant tension that defines life for soldiers defending Ukraine. The war has already produced countless moments in which Ukrainian forces demonstrated resilience against Russia's invasion. Their determination has drawn attention from observers around the world who recognize the significance of Ukraine's struggle to maintain its independence. But beyond the global political discussions, the conflict continues to unfold through encounters experienced by individuals standing in uniform. A patrol moving through damaged terrain, a checkpoint guarding a road, an unexpected signal from an opposing unit. These moments may seem small when compared to large military operations, yet they reveal the human dimension of the war. The reported appearance of a fake surrender represents one of those moments where the decisions of a few soldiers carried immediate consequences. Ukrainian troops responded by prioritizing their safety and maintaining control of the situation. Their training and discipline guided their actions as they assessed the behavior of the Russian soldiers involved. In doing so, they continued fulfilling the central mission assigned to Ukraine's armed forces: defend the country, protect fellow soldiers, maintain the security of Ukrainian territory. The war between Russia and Ukraine has already altered global discussions about sovereignty, security, and international law. Governments across the world have responded through diplomatic statements, economic measures, and support for Ukraine's defense. But for those standing on the front lines, the war remains defined by encounters that occur face to face. The reported incident serves as a reminder that warfare involves not only large military strategies, but also the choices made by individual soldiers in moments of uncertainty. Ukraine's forces continue standing in defense of their homeland. Their vigilance reflects the reality that every signal on the battlefield must be interpreted carefully. Trust cannot be assumed when the environment is shaped by ongoing conflict. And yet, even under these conditions, Ukrainian soldiers maintain their commitment to protecting their country and the people who live within it. The war continues. Ukraine's defense continues. And the determination of those standing on the front lines remains one of the most powerful elements shaping the course of the conflict.